guys, Sean here with the Stock Market Series podcast, and I am super excited to talk to you guys today about a concept that is so critical, so foundational, and pretty much the core of any decision making that you will ever do. And I want to preface this episode with a trade that expired today. It was an options trade. It was like a 2-week option trade on the stock which reported earnings. It was Barclays. It was just really, honestly, I'll tell you what it was. Is I had extra day trades on my Robinhood account, and I was like, dude, you know what? I'm going to turn these into cash. So I bought some puts on them a week and a half ago because every single time that Barclays has exploded after earnings, in the past 3 years, they've gone down over the next week. And it's just proven itself over and over and over again. And so the day that they exploded, bought puts, so I shorted them, bought puts. And those puts turned, from $120 to $300, which is pretty sweet considering I spent probably like 10 seconds on that trade, 5 minutes tops because I was recording. I wasn't actually trading that day, and I bought those puts because I was recording a lot of those courses that we are finished with now, which is so exciting. But it was still really, really, really nice way to kind of play off historic trends. And that kind of quick snap decision making is really the core of what we're going to talk about today, which I'm really pumped about. So with that said, I will see you guys after the intro. So the big question is this: how do investors like us who don't have a PhD in finance or millions to start investing, how do we grow our bank accounts to build real savings and retirements and yet still have the time to do what we really love? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. All right, awesome. Oh, I'm so excited. So today we're going to talk about the one kind of decision making that you have to master. If you want to have growth in your portfolio, if you want to have growth in your company, if you want to have growth in your family, if you want to have growth in your friendship, anything you want to expand, you have to have this one attribute. And the idea is making decisive decisions. So the way I was thinking about this morning, right? So this morning I got up, got everything ready, got a little bit of fun stock stuff done, which is exciting because different time zones and all that stuff. And then I got all my stuff and went skiing, right? And so 8 hours, 10 hours later, I don't freaking know. I just turned in this is the last day, right? So because this is the last day, I get to turn in my skis and I get to turn in my boots that I rented, right? And I totally forgot about that this morning. And so because of that, I just turned everything in. And I realized that I didn't have my Camelback, I didn't have anything, and so I had no shoes, and I just kind of walked home through snow and mud and stuff, in socks, in my ski socks, and I just realized how insanely important it is to make quick, decisive decisions. Because if you look at some of the most successful people on this planet, the way they get there is not by being haphazard or spending 15 years trying to figure out what they're gonna do. They make a quick decision with the evidence and the information that they need to decide, and then they stick with that decision for sometimes decades. You look at the guy who founded Twitter. He basically said he was going to start Twitter, and it was the one thing he was going to do. And it took him a freaking decade to turn it into reality. And nobody believed in him until the last couple of years when it became $1 billion venture. And yet, what's critical here is that this guy made it took him maybe a week or two to decide that he was going to start Twitter. And it took him years and years and years of follow-up to actually create it. And so it's so critical that you stick with your decisions. Because when you stick with your decisions, you can have massive impact and huge results based exclusively on being able to put more into what you're working on than anybody else around you. Think about it sort of as a really, really powerful sidebar. If you look, and obviously this is true with companies. Companies is the easiest way to see this. You look like Jeff Bezos, right? Everyone thought he was crazy, but when he went to start, this bookstore, when he went to get financing to build a warehouse, but it all came from his decision to basically say, look, I'm going to quit my Wall Street job, which I think is crazy, but I think he was working as a banker, so I guess working as a banker is not as fun as actually trading, which is so cool. But anyway, so he was working on Wall Street, and he made this decision, made a snap decision. He said, this is not it. This is not the future. And I'm going to go into online retail. And what the hell did he do for 2 decades later? He stuck with his decision. And so it's really critical. So with this trade that I just had on Barclays, the day I made it, I was down probably, I wasn't really down anything. It was just flat. It was a flat trade, maybe down 5%, something tiny like that. And so for me, I saw the potential here was basically double, or actually what happened was almost triple, the whatever I put in, because I could see sort of where, you only had to, the options were at 25 cents each. So, all you had to, it's a $10 stock, and the math just worked out really, really, really well. And so I saw it, I took action on it, and I made the quick decision to get in. And then here's the critical part, is once you decide to get in, you got to stick with it. Cannot crop out. Obviously you have a stop loss, right? Especially with stocks. Options stop losses are a little bit different, a little bit more difficult. But with stocks, right, like you obviously have a stop loss, right? But you don't really want to move that initial stop loss very much. And we talked about this before, but it's really, really critical that you stick with your decisions, especially, for me, like I spent probably, 5 minutes looking at the history of Barclays after they had earnings that made really big gaps up. And so for me, like I had done the research, I'd put in the work, done the effort, and I knew, look, historically, this thing's going to crash. It's going to go down a whole bunch. And it freaking did. And so here's the critical part, right? The most important thing is that you stick with your decision and you live with the outcome. This morning, I totally forgot to bring extra shoes or anything to walk home. And so I had to live with the outcome. I had to live with walking back in my socks, which got super wet. But you know what? That's okay, because you have to live with the consequences of your decisions and stick with those decisions until you know beyond the shadow of a doubt something's wrong. Because most people quit when they're halfway there. Most people quit when they're a quarter of the way there. Very few people actually make it to the end. Especially in careers, you see so many people that just stop when they're like halfway there. It's like, oh, this is too much work, too much effort, too much mental strain. But you have to keep pushing. Even physically, it's really interesting. I've like tried this out with weightlifting a whole bunch. What you think is the most you can do is very often only half of what you can do. And all you have to do is keep pushing. And so when you make a decision, you need to stick with the decision and follow it through. Because even if you don't get the perfect, result that you desire, any result is better than nothing. I was sitting with this guy on a lift today, and he's talking to me about sort of how he comes from Tennessee, and he hasn't really done anything ever, and he just kind of like drives boats around and stuff. And what I realized is, like, even if this guy made the craziest decision of his life to go and be like the craziest boat trick driver on the planet, even if that's like super crazy, that decision and commitment to that decision would just have a profound effect on his life. And so it doesn't matter if you're making good decisions or bad decisions. Preferably you want to make good decisions. But the most important thing you can do is train yourself to stay committed to your decisions and see them through and follow through to the end. Like, even if you decide to go and write a book and your book is crap, you've got your first book done. And I don't recommend writing bad books. Or things that you don't know about, but it's really, really critical that like you just pick something and do it. I was thinking about Michael Phelps this morning, and I realized that because last night some guy, I don't remember who it was, he got signed over to the Yankees for like $350 million over the course of 9 years. So, $30 million give or take a year. And in New York, you're going to get taxed like hell because there's New York state tax, but whatever, right? Like, I'm thinking, what makes this 29-year-old dude worth, $30 million a year? And I realized that the core and the foundation and the basis of everything was that a long time ago, likely when he was in high school, he made a decision that he was going to be a professional baseball player. And he stuck with that decision for a decade. And then, and only at the end, and only after you've put in more effort than 99% of people by sticking with that decision, long after it reasonably looks like you should stop, will you have the insane payout. For this guy, it was hundreds of millions of dollars. For Michael Phelps, like I'm thinking about Michael Phelps, he swam for decades before he, won Olympic medals. And he would literally spend 8+ hours a day in a pool. Now, I'm not saying he'd spend 8 hours a day, in a pool, but like he spent every moment he had working towards winning golds constantly over and over and becoming the best swimmer on the planet. Why? Because he made a decision a long time ago that he was going to be a freaking awesome swimmer. How long do you think it took him to make that decision? How long do you think it took him to decide that he was going to be the best swimmer on the planet? I'd say maybe, there's a lot of backstory behind it. There's a lot of, history behind it. But I'd say maybe it takes 15 minutes, an hour to make that decision. And yet it's a decision that will totally change the course of his life if he sticks with it, and only if he sticks with it. You cannot quit after year 5 and say, oh, I'm not getting the results I want. Because you'll never get the results you want unless you commit, unless you make it so your only option is success with the venture, the path that you choose. For me, like when I was investing and getting into stocks for the first time, I decided mentally that the only option, the only path for success for me was to invest in the American economy, was to invest in stocks, right? Invest in assets. A lot of crypto too. And then I stuck with that decision through highs, through lows. It does not feel good missing out on 6 figures. It really doesn't. But I'll tell you what, you've got to overcome those failures to have the success. You've got to keep pushing. You have to stick with that decision and keep going to that end destination. That's the message for today. It's so critical, so crucial that you're willing to live with the outcomes of your decisions and that you stay grounded and committed to your decisive decisions. That's the key. So, if you guys got a ton of value out of this podcast, go out there, apply it, absolutely crush it. I'm going to go ice my ankles because, oh my gosh, we did like so many jumps today and we're about to go to the Alps and dude, we've got like a day of travel and I'm going to have to like reset my ankles because if I don't, I think I might crumple over in the airport. So, rice, man, rest, ice. I don't know what the C means, but I know the E means elevate. So that's kind of the formula that I follow. So yeah, guys, thank you so much. Have an amazing day and don't get shin splints. Thanks. Bye. See ya. Want more stock market secrets? If so, you'll get your free copy of my best-selling book, 9 to Noon. You get your free copy plus $11,176 of unannounced bonuses. It took me years to uncover, completely for free at 9tonoonsecrets.com. Inside 9 to Noon, you'll find the top 38 secrets you can use to double your portfolio every 2 years and make upwards of 10% daily.